Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and started a mass protest which led to the end of segregation on public transport. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German Lutheran pastor who was consistently outspoken in his criticism of Nazism in Germany. Preferring to stay in the country of his birth, he was eventually arrested and executed in 1945. During World War I, Edith Cavell, a nurse in Belgium, was arrested and executed for helping Allied servicemen escape back to England. Shortly before her execution, she said, "Patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone."
He climbs upon the hill, on the rock on which he stands. He looks back at the crowd, he looks down at his hands, and he says, "I am a difference maker. I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only one that speaks to him. I am the friendliest of friends of God." He walks upon the hill to the rock on which he stands. He looks back at the crowd, he looks down at his hands, and he says, "I am a difference maker. I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only one that speaks to him, and I am the friendliest of friends of God."
Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani schoolgirl, defied threats of the Taliban to campaign for the right to education. She survived being shot in the head by the Taliban and has become a global advocate for human rights, women's rights, and the right to education. Maximilian Kolbe was a Polish Franciscan priest. During the Polish occupation, he was arrested twice by the Nazis, but continued to offer shelter to the Jews and Polish refugees. In 1941, he was sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, where he volunteered to take the place of a man condemned to death, showing great courage, faith, and dignity.
I am on the fence about nearly everything I've seen. I have felt the fire be put out by too much gasoline. We're all strangers passing through a place in time and afternoon. Life is but a vision, we're all placing in the passing through. Helpless conversation of a man who says he cares a lot. A passive confrontation about who might throw a punch or not. We are all transgressors, we're all sinners, we're all astronauts. So if you're beaten death, then raise your hand, but shut up if you're not. I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only one that speaks to him. Oh, I am the friendliest of friends of God. I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only one that speaks to him. I am the friendliest of friends of God.
In 1996, hundreds gathered to protest a KKK rally in Michigan. They chased down a white man wearing a Confederate flag t-shirt, knocked him down, and started hitting and kicking him. An 18-year-old girl, Keisha Thomas, threw herself on top of him to protect him from the angry mob.
I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only one that speaks to him. I am the friendliest of friends of God. I am a difference maker. Oh, I am the only
Wow. That is so incredibly inspiring. In fact, I encourage all of us to, you can go back and watch that kind of online later again and just review some of those names, because a lot of the names listed in that story are people that really had a profound impact on my life. Certainly Dietrich Bonhoeffer, when I was in high school, when I read his book, The Cost of Discipleship, and then to discover later that at the very end of Hitler's regime, that one of the last things that he did personally was send a command, a message specifically that Dietrich Bonhoeffer would be executed right before the fall of the Third Reich, because he had been such a voice of hope and for truth. And I think every one of those stories is literally like electrifyingly inspiring to me of how to live your life, whether it's certainly Nelson Mandela, and if you've never read his book, The Long Walk to Freedom, it's one of the best books that I've read in the last decade for sure. Incredible. But here's the thing that's interesting. It feels impossible. By the way, I'm Steve Andrews. Hi there, everybody. Welcome to summertime. I'm kind of into that. Man, I was so into that, like I forgot where I was, but it was so inspiring. But I thought, sometimes we look at these people, it doesn't feel like that's possible for our lives. Like I'm not going to be, all that. And then the image, the one that hit me the hardest, I don't know if it was you, and I don't know the guy's name, but it's the guy who stood in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square. This one lone guy. It's amazing. Don't you want to meet him someday? Like this courage and this greatness is so powerful. And there's something, sometimes it's misleading. And this is what I want to talk about today with our hero for today, is that sometimes greatness is not the massive things, but it's the acts of faithfulness along the way. Because what you would learn if you read Mandela's book, Long Walk to Freedom, or if you read the life story of Jackie Robinson or Rosa Parks or of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, it was the little steps they made along the way that whether they would have ever been remembered in history or not, or ever been great, they would have lived a life of greatness. You see what I'm saying? Like they were people that cared about the people around them in the small moments of life, the small commitments that make up a life. And I think sometimes, not only do we think greatness is just the real big moment, when greatness really is, it's the practices of life that really matter. It's kindness shown daily to the people in your life. It's being available. It's making eye contact with your spouse and your children in the morning before you've had a cup of coffee and actually smiling. It's literally those things that make a difference. And sometimes we actually confuse what greatness is. Sometimes we think greatness is just doing things that we wanted to do. And I'll give you an example of this. I was hunting in South Africa earlier this summer, and I've had a chance to hunt with a group of people that everything you hunt is provided to soup kitchens and orphanages in the East Cape region of Adelaide. And sometimes thousands of pounds of meat, which is an unbelievable difference for these people in a place that has 90% unemployment. But for me, I had always dreamed about doing this specific hunt. And Eric, if you pull up a couple of pictures of the mountains, I went up into the Stormberg Mountains where I wanted to hunt this. So I'm hunting up in those highest regions that you're looking for this little tiny antelope called the Vail Reebok, which is for you is ridiculous. None of you have ever even heard of it, but it's a really hard mountain hike, and it's something that I always wanted to do. And I ended up for 2 days hiking up and down in these mountains. And there's another photo too, just kind of give you a sense of it's really rough country, rough walking, and for my body, it was probably more than I should have done. Well, when I got to the very end, I'd been dreaming I literally for years, decades, dreaming about hunting this very obscure animal out in the middle of nowhere. We're up around 6,500 feet up, and we're working, we're hiding, we're crawling. And by the way, just thinking about getting older is funny. When I crawl now, my skin is so thin, I literally just just tear the skin off when you're crawling. Isn't that something you wanted to know? It's just one of the joys of getting old, guys. It's awesome. So get out there and tear the skin off. So I get to the very end. I'm at the top of the mountain, and I've probably hiked between the 2 days, probably about 12 miles, maybe 10 miles, and I'm exhausted, and I missed the shot, shooting from one ridge to the other. This is when you're supposed to go, oh. Although some of you are like, yay, he missed, the dirty hunter. So, but I was so depressed because I thought, I'll probably never get to do this hunt again. It was such a hard walk. My knees were totally burned out. And then I got back to the ranch the next day where 6 missionaries had come up to process the meat that we were delivering to these 3 soup kitchens that serve about 1,500 people in Adelaide twice a week with protein-based meals that they would otherwise not be getting. And then the 2 orphanages that are just doing incredible work among the most broken kids in this area. And we provided 4,000 pounds of meat. But here's the thing that I want to say about what does actually greatness look like. These 6 missionaries between the ages of 35 and 75, multinational, multilingualist group, there were 7 of them. They spent 8 to 10 hours a day just cutting and processing packages of meat to deliver, and they did this on their vacation. And they were back in the abattoir at the ranch, literally covered in blood and working and preparing this gift and doing it all with joy. Now, why am I telling you that? Because hunting up in the mountains has nothing to do with greatness. Greatness is about sitting in the back and preparing meat for a couple thousand kids in a region of 90% unemployment and doing it with joy on your vacation. The point is, anybody can be great. I think that's what I'm trying to say here. Because it's easy to look at the situations of our life and feel like it's not possible to make a difference. And in this series, we kept looking at it. By the way, I've loved this team. Shauna put together today's message. Nate Marielke from our Troy did Samson and Peter, which I thought were incredible. It's been so fun to do it. But I thought in this series, we talked about living heroic lives with Jesus. And not to live for our own gratification, but for something bigger. And if you're like me, you either thought greatness was the wrong thing, or you felt inadequate or not qualified because you don't have the right skills, education, or training, or you feel incompetent compared to others. Have you ever felt those things? Come on, answer me. Of course you have. We all feel that. And I think that's part of, like, there are forces of evil that want us not to do what is good because we think, well, I'm not good enough to do it. Maybe it's the demands of life, or it feels like you don't have the margin. Maybe it's your job or your marriage, your family, or your finances. Maybe you've just felt you're just so ordinary that the idea of doing something great feels out of reach. And I know that we've all felt that way at one time or another. And if you felt that way like I have, then today's message was created for you. Because this morning I want to share a few minutes and lean in to what it means for each of us by looking at the life of a woman named Priscilla. Her story is found in the book of Acts. She appears periodically throughout the New Testament books. And as we come into this, you're going to find that there's actually nothing that she does that is remembered in history as being absolutely unbelievable, but she's just available of doing the little things and in some cases the big things, but faithfully year after year throughout her life. So let's start in Acts 18, verses 1 through 3. It says, after this, at Acts 18, we're in the section of the book of Acts of the early church after Jesus is resurrected from the dead, where Paul is going from city to city, and he's planting churches, and he's being chased out of places. He's being, at one point, stoned nearly what they thought was to death, but he gets up and he walks away from a stoning, and he travels, and at this point, he leaves Athens, where he had you can go back and read it, probably the most famous sermon that Paul preached at Mars Hill, at the Areopagus, right next to the Parthenon in Athens, where you overlook the whole area. And Paul had just preached this amazing sermon I've sat on the rocks at Mars Hill and preached a couple of pretty good sermons myself. But actually, I've sat there and we've read Paul's story and we've thought about it, this amazing place, because this is where all the intellectuals and philosophers of the day, and Paul shared Christ with them there. Anyway, he's on to Corinth, and there he meets a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius, who was the emperor at the time, had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Now, as I read this, I just want to say, whatever Luke is underplaying, they probably fled for their lives. And who knows if they were even able to pack up their possessions. But they leave Rome, and now they're in Corinth as refugees. And it says Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, he stayed and worked with them. So first of all, I want you to notice that the person we're highlighting today is a refugee. A refugee is not really in a place usually to have a great influence. It's something that nobody would ever choose. But here they are. It's probable that they fled Rome and feared for their lives. This move is typical, by the way, of Jews throughout history. Jews are always running. There's always a sense of insecurity if you're as a Jewish person in history. I've read books about this where Jewish people say it's never a question of if persecution is going to break out. They always say it's only a question of when is the next time. So this is one of those times. And when they get to Corinth, what you don't realize about Corinth, that Corinth was probably the most wealthy city of its day. It would have been like a Shanghai or a Singapore or a New York City or a Los Angeles. It was massive wealth and progressiveness. And it was wild. And then it would have been as wild as any place in the world in terms of moral kind of freedom to do anything and everything. It really would fit today's world perfectly. So when they get to Corinth, there's plenty of opportunities to work because it's always hard for me to say this, an isthmus. There's like a channel that allowed people to circumnavigate part of the most dangerous part of the Mediterranean Sea. So all trade went through Corinth. And so jobs would have been plentiful. So Priscilla and Aquila make Corinth their new home. They have a business as tent makers. They're probably living in tents themselves, and Paul finds them. So it's no accident that Paul finds them, by the way. The word means, when Paul finds up, the word horisko means he found them after searching. And I thought about this. Everywhere Paul went, he was expecting divine encounters because he's always following the nudge of Jesus. And so this morning, just as I get this message, I wanted to interrupt the message and bring out a new friend, Emma DeVoe. Emma, come on out. You guys, can y'all give Emma a big welcome?
Morning.
Good to see you.
Morning.
I want you to remember this blue jean jacket and this beautiful white hair. I'm an expert on hair, by the way, and that's great hair.
We know that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of Paul just becoming a tent maker. Priscilla and Aquila are refugees. They're doing work. They're working together. They have this business. They're kind of using their gifts, and we find out later that they're using it to, in a sense, welcome Paul to do ministry. And one of the things that we've been talking about, especially the last couple of years here, is listening to the stirrings of God. Like, how's God nudging you? How's God wanting you to be available along the way? And so I just wanted you to, when we're talking about greatness here, greatness begins with listening to the nudgings and the moving of God. So where did this all start? With a spoon?
With a spoon, basically with a spoon. Which
I must have been out of town on the spoon.
I don't know exactly when it was.
Does anybody remember the spoon?
We were all given a spoon.
Oh, you're still going.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what was the spoon
And we
about?
were all asked, what is God stirring in you?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the only thing I remember about that message is what was God stirring in me. And I took
probably
my spoon
I didn't get it,
home and I prayed on
when
it.
I give it, people usually remember several pages of notes. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. So, but that's the main thing. You remember the thing. What is God stirring? So,
yeah,
so you went home and thought about that.
I did, and I prayed about it, and I thought, probably a couple months later, I thought, oh, weather's starting to change, and I need to start growing things because I love to grow. I love to have a garden. I like
Okay.
to get my hands dirty. And I think it's a miracle to plant a seed and to end up with food.
Yeah,
'Cause I like to eat.
it's amazing.
It's amazing. And I also like, actually, I love to serve in the community, to help others, to be part of a group that serves in the community.
Yeah.
And I thought, one day I just thought, well, I could put those together. We could put those together and have a garden that's run by and run for the community. So I brought the idea here to Sonia.
Okay.
And she took me by the hand, and we went and looked out
Sounds
the
like her,
window.
yeah.
And it was raining, so we didn't go outside. And we looked out the window, and she said, we have that property out there, and it's waiting for a garden, but we need someone to lead the team. Wasn't really crazy about it, but I said, okay, I'll do it.
Because you'd served in the past here, where?
Oh, I have served in the nursery. I've delivered Thanksgiving baskets.
But more behind the
done
scenes.
Make rest. I
Yeah.
do Forgotten Harvest every week.
Yeah, so you're involved in so much.
I
Yeah.
love to be involved in the serving in the
But this was a
community.
big step. This is a
It's
little different
huge.
for you. Yeah.
It's, for me, it's huge. And one person can't do these things.
Yeah.
You need the whole community.
Yeah, you need, and part of this is the dream of making food available to people that would
That
be
deserve
an
it.
incredible blessing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There is always a demand for food.
So you talked with Sonia, you started working on this. What's happened so far?
Not a lot.
No.
We
We got water.
got water.
You got water.
We got water. It took a long
So there's
time.
actually
but
water out there?
There's 2 spigots
Okay.
out there now. So now
that's
that we have water, we're gonna have to start getting the ground taken care of so it can be amended. So
Okay.
in the spring, we can just jump right in and start planting, do a little tilling, start
Yeah.
planting.
So you do some in the fall to get prepared and then plant in the
Yes,
spring.
and then plant in the spring.
Okay.
It takes a while to get
So
the ground
as
amended.
as you're stepping out and thinking about this, is there anything that God has really revealed to you about his heart about this or about your willingness to follow him in this?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Say it again.
No, I'm saying, what have you learned about following God's nudges? Like, are you learning anything, or are you just stepping
Oh.
out?
Sometimes, okay, so when I first started to serve, I was a little more nervous and wasn't sure about meeting everybody. And sometimes when they ask you to serve around here, they want you to jump right in. It's a little scary.
Yeah.
For the average folks, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
So initially, I just kind of dipped my toes in the water. And then eventually I, got in knee deep.
Yeah. And now you're in over your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So right after the service, you're going to be at the hub.
I am going to be at the hub if anybody has any questions or wants to sign up to lend a hand.
Yeah, people would love to do that.
I'm sure a lot of you know what you're doing a lot more than I do.
So there are people, come on, I'm just curious. It doesn't mean you have to go to the hub, but how many of you do like to garden? Just curious. Oh, wow.
Oh, look at all these people.
So I was telling Emma, these fingernails have never had dirt under them.
Yeah, that won't.
They're pristine.
Yeah,
I've kept them very carefully preserved.
that won't last
Are you
long.
going to try to get me out digging the dirt?
Absolutely.
I don't know, man.
Yeah,
That would be a miracle of God.
absolutely.
Okay, so you're going to be out there, and I just want to say this. We don't know what's going to happen with this garden or what God would do any more than Rosa Parks knew what was going to happen when she sat in the front of the bus.
Right.
Or Nelson Mandela was locked on Robben Island for 27 years. You don't know what the outcome is, but the point is, I think greatness is stepping out to do what God is nudging you to do. And here is a person that's just going to do that. Who knows where, I'm thinking down the road, food will be delivered to someone who's going to break down in tears because they didn't expect it or it came and it blessed their lives.
Absolutely. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping, anybody thinking about popping out and just talking to her in the back? Okay, several of you. I would love for you to take that opportunity because you think a community garden could be as powerful as almost anything. And I just want to remind you of last year's message that Emma talked about. What is God stirring in you? Go back and, if you kept your spoon or you grab a spoon and say, God, how are you moving in my life? Because God is moving all the time in amazing ways. In fact, I'll tell you about one of them as we receive the offering. The offering has come up. And do we pass stuff now? Are we back passing? Oh, I love that. Bring it down. Come on. Let's do that. We just sent a team to Pokot, and they actually did something that I haven't done before. They actually did a day trip into Uganda, where we also have wells in Uganda. Remember, we have church planting in northwest Kenya, we have planting in Sudan, and we now are planting among the Pokot and the Karamojong in Uganda. So now, I don't know why, but as the team, this was just a couple weeks ago, was blasting into Uganda, they didn't stop at the checkpoint. Like, who's the dummy leading this trip? I should say their names out loud. I'm actually getting together with them tomorrow. So they blow through. Well, anyway, they get flagged down by Ugandan soldiers. And this is not like a regular, road between countries. This is out in the middle of nowhere, where you literally feel like you're lost on planet Earth. And the Ugandan soldiers started yelling at our Kenyan pastors for not stopping at the checkpoint. And they thought the checkpoint was empty. That's why they went past it. So they had a 40-minute yelling session. Meanwhile, John Cummings, one of our guys, one of my best buddies I'm getting together with tomorrow, he thinks while the Ugandan soldiers are yelling at our Kenyan pastors, he thinks it'd be really cool to take a picture with his iPhone. What a dummy. John Cummings, listen to this talk. And so one of the soldiers sees it, comes over, yanks the phone out of John's hands, and then if John eventually gets out and he gets yelled at. And they're like, no, we're actually doing good. We're going to repair a couple of the wells that we've dug in Uganda, and the people there are waiting for us. They said, you're lying, you're here, you're not supposed to be here, and your penalty is we're sending some of our soldiers along with you to keep an eye on you. Well, they get there, they get to the first well, and there's a couple of hundred people waiting for them, and they have the repair because the well had broken. They repair the well. 200 people are singing and worshiping. Our team introduces themselves and everything and shares some words of encouragement. And then the Ugandan soldiers want to introduce themselves. And then they start singing and clapping and singing and worshiping Jesus. And the Ugandan soldiers start singing and clapping, and they're worshiping Jesus with everybody else. All because an idiot friend of mine takes out his phone and snaps a picture. My point is, God is always working, and he's always moving in the nudgings of our life. And I love it. And so at the end of this story, I've shared this with a couple other campuses. At the end of this story, they drive back to the border. The soldiers get out, and they tell their commanding officer, he said, these guys are for real. And the officer that runs the checkpoint says to the Kenyan pastors, he says, next time you come through, would you tell us more about Jesus Christ? We'd like to know more about Jesus Christ. So the point is, whether it's a community garden or whether you're out in the middle of nowhere, Africa, or you're just in your neighborhood, God is saying, be available. Be available, just like Priscilla and Aquila, that when Paul went to see them, they were available to say, Paul, you're bringing the gospel. We're believers too. You come and live with us. We'll give you a job. You'll be able to make enough to live and to be able to do the work that you do in Corinth. And Paul did an amazing work in Corinth. There was an amazing church that was there. And I thought, I just love the fact that when we listen to the nudgings of God, something marvelous happens. That's how I'm thinking of my mom. I think I've been here once or twice since my mom died in September. But her life was simply following the daily nudgings of God. Hey, this person needs encouragement. Maybe you stop by and see how that person's doing. Maybe you look at someone and say, hey, how are you doing? It's simply being available to God in the moments of your life and believing that Jesus Christ is working in those moments. Okay. Secondly, this gets better about Priscilla. It says, meanwhile, later on in chapter 18, there's a lot more happening, but it says, later, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor, and he taught about Jesus accurately. Though he only knew the baptism of John, he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. And look who shows up. Now in Ephesus, which is a significant distance from Corinth. It's literally across the northern section of the Mediterranean Sea. And it says, when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more adequately. Now listen, this is what I want you to know. Apollos becomes a dynamo of the early church. He goes all over the known world. He brings the gospel of Jesus Christ. But when Priscilla and Aquila met him, he wasn't fully prepared. And they hear him, and they pull him into their home. And they pull him into their lives to prepare him for what later becomes great impact everywhere he goes. The big change in this story is this, something very unusual. Look at verse 26. It was, we first learned about Aquila and Priscilla. It's Aquila's name first and then Priscilla's. And then now you see Priscilla is mentioned before Aquila. Now you say, well, that's, what they're just writing. It's no big deal. No, it is a big deal. Because in ancient writings, you would never mention the woman first before the man. That just would never happen. And actually in ancient texts, you very rarely would mention the women at all unless they did something incredibly unexpected, notorious, or powerful. And so Priscilla is mentioned because of this life of being available to God, using her home for hospitality, using her work to employ people that are serving God, discipling someone who's on the verge of really doing something great for God, but needs more training. And this is a big change. It's important to remember that this is Corinth and this is Ephesus, two of the wealthiest cities of their time. Most of you don't know this, but I've led trips to Corinth and Ephesus several times. But in the public arena of Greece, the only women who would ever speak, there were two kinds of women. Does anybody remember this? There are two kinds of women that would speak in public. The first was the Greek word hetera, which would be I don't know exactly how to say it, a high-end madam, a courtesan, or a very, very socially elevated prostitute. That's what I'm trying to say. These women would be able to get education. They would own property. They would have patronage of wealthy people, of wealthy men of power. They were highly cultured, and they could speak in the public square. A normal woman couldn't do that, or she would be just considered to be a prostitute. The other women that would speak in public was the word where we get the word pornai. P-O-R-N-A-I is the Greek word, where we get the word pornography or pornos, which means kind of illicit sexual activity and behavior. And this is where each day there were about 1,000 women, 1,000 young women and 1,000 young men that were owned by the temple of Aphrodite, which was at the top of the mountain overlooking Corinth. And these women, these young women and these young men would come down every day and offer themselves to the people of Corinth, this very wealthy city. Just like human trafficking today in the world, which is everywhere. In fact, it's more of a problem now than it's been in a long time. And they would come down and offer themselves, and whatever money they make, they would take it back to the temple. And they would be enslaved to the temple for life. These young women would speak out in the public arena too, right? But a normal woman couldn't do that. So a normal woman that was trying to create a certain way of living her life would have to live more in quietness and behind the scenes, and by hard work, and by hospitality, and by service. And by the way, these young women that were owned by the temple of Aphrodite, does anybody remember me telling you how they were identified? Does anybody remember this? By their shaved heads. That's why if you ever read the book of Corinth, where Paul is 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Paul is writing and he says, I want the women to cover their heads while they're worshiping. Most scholars now think that Paul was telling the women in Corinth to cover their heads is so the young women that were coming to Christ and being purchased out of slavery by wealthy Corinthian believers could come and worship and have their head covered without feeling the shame of their baldness or their short hair, which identified them as prostitutes. Isn't that incredible? And Paul, in this context, Priscilla is a woman of character, and she and Aquila are this unified team. And they're living a totally different way than the culture around them. This is why I love everywhere that I go in the world, there are couples like Priscilla and Aquila. Reuben Mariacall, who leads our ministry in Pocot, his wife Lois is a rock star. She has the same amount of education and biblical training that he has. They're an incredible team. They are Priscilla and Aquila. Jaya, who just died, his wife Lakshmi Sankar, one of the most amazing women you'll ever meet. Jackie and Michael Kakish, who live in Ramallah and help lead the church there. And Michael coordinates our Israel trips. They are an incredible team. As a worship team, they're as good as, they're like up there with Davey and Aaron Jones. They're incredible people. Aaron Jones, Davey Nelson, Steve Andrews. I mean, they're right at that musical level of skill. Nihad and Salwa Salman in Bethlehem. And then I think about people here, Tracy and Jim Hinkle. Talk about a rock star of people that are serving Christ together. And I just love this. And this is a vision that God has for our marriages, that we would be this unified team serving and empowering each other to do the great things that we're able to do. So, the narrative, oh, by the way, did I forget the offering? I did it. Yeah, you're right. I did it. I remembered it. You guys are always ripping on me because I forget it. Yeah, I showed you, even though I couldn't remember it. Okay. The narrative on Priscilla and her husband in the book of Acts goes quiet for a while. You say, well, they're just, Priscilla and Aquila are just serving God. You wonder what's happening to them. We get to Romans 16, and he says, greet Priscilla, Paul. Romans 16, by the way, Paul is coming to near the end of his life, where he's going to be executed eventually. He says, greet Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in Christ Jesus. Paul is writing this from Rome, where he's going to eventually be executed. And he says this about Priscilla and Aquila. And again, who does he mention first? He mentions Priscilla, which is unusual. He says, my co-workers in Christ Jesus. Listen now. They risked their lives for me. And not only for me, but all the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them. Wow. What a statement. This little-known couple in the New Testament, and it says, all the churches among the non-Jewish peoples of the Mediterranean world, of Greece and Rome, are grateful for this couple. This couple was available to God. And Paul mentions here that Priscilla and her husband risked their lives for him. He says they were my co-workers, which is, to me, the Greek word is synergos, where we get the word synergy. He says these were igniters of faith that ignited me and ignited all the believers of the Gentile churches that Paul was planting all over Greece and the Roman Empire. You know what I would love? Emma DeVoe wants to create a community garden. She's felt the nudging of God to do that, right? We have no idea what could happen there. But she was saying today, what's her biggest worry? She's worried that she's not going to have synergos. She's worried that she's not going to have coworkers. When we were starting Kensington years ago, and Wally Hostetter asked me to start this church, you know what my greatest fear was? Synergos. Like, who's going to be a co-worker? When you're stepping out to do something God calls you to do, what's your biggest concern? Am I going to be alone in this? Or will there be co-laborers? The Greek, actually not just co-laborers, but co-agitators. People that stir it up. People that create synergy along the way. I thought about this. There's so many people throughout the history of Kensington that were just, and still are, incredible synergy people. And some of them, it's interesting, you know instantly. David Ann Wilson would be our most prominent synergos people that are known. They're known all over the country in Christian community and family. Mark and Callie Nelson, that Kensington could never happen without them and their creativity and their leadership. And then there's so many others. But then there are others you don't have no idea what they are. Anybody know Kimberly and Ed Silva? Anybody here? Okay, Terry knows him. You're cheating, Terry. Terry Lipsky's always in the front cheating. Kimberly worked 60 to 80 hours a week for the first 2 years of Kensington for free as our administrator. And I mean, she did everything. Ed did a lot of our organization and business stuff. They poured their lives out. Brian Leslie Kane. Brian was an incredible wisdom advisor to me. Lynn and Bruce Block. Lynn led our kids ministry and set all the pattern of everything that's ever good that's come out of our kids ministry at Kensington. It was because of Lynn Block. She and Bruce live up in Lansing now. Their family owns Block Imaging. Any of you ever done business with them? But then there's John and Elaine Doctor. And then there was Ruth and Ivan French. Ruth was just in town speaking at a Kensington friend's funeral. Ivan's been gone on to his heavenly reward. Dave and Tammy Verba, all these what were ordinary people. They were, honestly, you wouldn't have picked them out of a crowd. But they were synergists. And I thought today, part of what Priscilla was is what she and Aquila were to the people in their lives. And I want to say, who are you to whom? Like, where is God calling you to be creating synergy and movement for other people? It could be your kids, your grandkids, it could be your neighbors, it could be your place of employment, it could be a ministry that God's calling you to step out and do. It could be the community garden, who knows? But it's literally to say, I want to be a co-laborer with people. Because I think when your life is over, I think what you're going to remember the people that you loved and poured your life into. You're also going to remember the people you served with and that you gave your life away with. You think those guys that were on that Kenya trip, Ben, one of the guys who was leading that trip, he's like, I was scared to death. He said, I thought we were going to be killed, executed, and been out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody would even know it. Do you think those guys will ever forget John taking that picture? Like, before they die, that's probably the last thing they'll flash before their eyes. I don't know. But they just had an incredible moment of seeing God work in them together. And then, this is the last kind of biblical thing I want to teach you. He says they risked their lives for me. And not just for me. This is the word. This is literally 2 words. To risk means to place under. To risk, the literal Greek meaning is to place under. And then the other word is not life, but neck. You shoot this up on the screen? So it's literally to seize or twist the neck or throat, to bend back the neck of a victim to be slain. It's literally like they placed their head down, had their head pulled back, ready to have their throat cut for the cause of Christ in the world. They literally did not treat their lives as precious to them for the sake of the church in the world. Now, how does that make you feel about them? Does it make you feel something? It makes you feel like they were just ordinary people that you've never even heard a sermon about probably, and that the church in the world was grateful to them because of their faith. They were incredible synergists. They were incredible partners, co-workers. And here's the interesting part. We don't know if they lost their lives or not. Remember, it was shortly after this that the persecutions began to break out. Christian leaders started to be killed, much like China in 1950 when the Chinese Communist government took over. And almost all the Christian leaders in China, all the pastors were either executed or put in life in prison. And literally in one fell swoop, they just pushed the Chinese church underground. And now we know that there are considered to be as many as 100 million Christians in China. Coming out of this brokenness of people that gave their lives, people that were co-workers along the way. So, Priscilla and her husband make a couple more appearances, but I just want to identify one more. And to me, this is the coolest thing. It says, the churches in the province of Asia send you greetings. Aquila and Priscilla greet you warmly in the Lord. And by the way, at this point, we don't know how many people Priscilla and Aquila have been involved. It says, Aquila and Priscilla, now it's Aquila first, Priscilla second, now greet you warmly in the Lord. And so does the church that meets at their house. This is much later. The point is, Priscilla and Aquila are still out there what? Being available to God, serving people, welcoming people in their home, having a fellowship. Remember, at that time, all the churches of Jesus Christ were in homes. That's why when we encourage all of you to meet in your homes, to meet in coffee shops and restaurants, to be in small groups, let's fellowship. Let's treat every human encounter as if God orchestrated it, because he did. The impact and bravery of Priscilla, along with her husband Aquila, is so cool. In fact, I don't know of another person that's mentioned in the New Testament where it says all the churches are grateful for these people. I don't think it says that about anybody else, but about this woman and this man, because they were faithful to God. They were in partnership in their marriage, in their work, in their ministry. They were truly what it means to be a team. That's something I would pray for all of our marriages, and I would pray for every team you're on, that there would be this sense of we lay our lives down, we stick our necks out for each other. And so in closing, I want to make 2 points that Shauna just made so beautifully. I love these, is because they describe Priscilla and Aquila's life so well, especially Priscilla, is that change makers have a posture of open hands. This has always been a Kensington core value from the beginning. Change makers always have a posture of open hands. Everything they had was available to others. Everything they owned. I can't imagine that Priscilla and Aquila were ever going, we're tent makers, and someday we're going to be legendary. Can you imagine Emma DeVoe out there? You go talk to her in the hub today, and she goes, someday this community garden will be legendary. It might. You have no idea, but it might. It might be something that literally changes the course of somebody's life by being served in love and cared for. I don't know what your skills are. Cooking, photography, coaching, crafting, baking, IT, teaching, relating to kids, leading, communicating, design, IT, computer, whatever it is. Simply say, I'm open-handed with God about what God wants to do in my life. The second thing I want to share as the band comes out is change makers move in bravery. You might not be called to risk your life, but Priscilla and Aquila were bold and they were brave. They moved from Rome to Corinth, probably at the threat of their lives. They later returned to Rome. Who knows where else they lived? How many times have you moved and said, God, how do you want to work in my new place where I'm living? They also joined Paul. Priscilla joined Paul on one of his missionary trips. And I love this. Bravery doesn't mean that you're not scared or that you're uncertain. But bravery means facing the opportunities you have in front of you with boldness and courage. So I'm just finishing this today. I don't know where God's calling you to go, but God's calling us to live with courage. Like right now, God's call is just to love and nurture and be sweet to their baby, right? Like that's God's call in your life. Isn't that beautiful? And just being available. You know what I did this week? I drove my kids to an on-goal soccer camp back and forth all week long, and we had stuff in the evenings. And some of the kids had a shorter day than the others. Guys, I took grandkids to Culver's 12 times this week. I do not want to see Culver's again for another week. I'm taking a week sabbatical from Culver's. But I'm saying, nobody's writing a book about that. It's not a big deal. But it's exactly what God wanted me to do last week. Enjoy that, right? So just think of this, of being available to God and loving and living, and then to be brave in what you're doing. Because God created you as a difference maker. That's what Aaron's saying at the beginning of this day. And each of you have everything you need to bring hope to the world around you and to do something great. No, we're not going to be Nelson Mandela. It'd be great if we were. But you can make an impact with who you are right now and what you have. Your voice matters. Your life matters. Your role matters. Your energy matters. And when we intentionally live on purpose seeking Christ, moving in bravery, opening our hands, we can be just like Priscilla and Aquila, ordinary women, ordinary men who do extraordinary things for the kingdom of God. Lord, thank you for this incredible privilege, just preaching this message and being a part of this Heroes series where we realize that so much of greatness today is bound up in these simple acts of faithfulness along the way. And so, Lord, open our hearts to just, man, we're going to do whatever it is you call us to do. And when we fail, we'll stumble along and we'll get back up. Help us to be great co-workers with others. Help us to stick our necks out and risk our lives for the things that matter. In Jesus' name, amen.
Narrow as the road may seem, I'll follow where your spirit leads. Broken as my life may be, I will give you every peace. I hear you call, I am available. I say, yes, Lord, I am available. Here I am with open hands, counting on your grace again. Less of me and more of you. I just want to see you move. I hear you call, I am available. I say, yes, Lord, I am available. I hear you calling, God. I'm available to you. I say, yes, Lord, I am available. So available. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am, here I am. You can have it all. Sing it again. Here I am. We present our bodies as a living sacrifice, for the one who gives me life. Nothing is a sacrifice, so use me how you want to, God. Have your throne within my heart. I hear you call. I am available. I say, yes, Lord. I am available. I'm available. I'm casting everything to you, God. 'Cause I know you can.
You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, an ocean steep, but faith will stay. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. My soul rests in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine.
Oh, Lord Jesus. God, I pray that the message this morning would not go forgotten when we leave this room. Lord, because you call each and every single one of us to greatness. And that greatness is so beautifully undefined because it means so many different things for each and every single one of us. But the two things we know are true, that you call us to live with open hands. And you do call us to be brave, to walk out into the world, into the unknown, into the waters. Just like Emma was saying, she feels like the waters are starting to rise. She doesn't know what's coming next. But Lord Jesus, would you always keep it at the forefront of our mind and our heart and our spirit to continue to ask you, Lord, what are you doing? How are you stirring me? How are you moving? Jesus, may we be attuned to the movement of your spirit, to the sound of your voice, and to your will for our lives. Amen. Man, I am so thankful for that message that Steve gave and for this worship team leading us in those two songs. And I pray that that really is a constant reminder to be available, and that when the unknown comes or when you hear the word of the Lord moving you, the nudge of the Spirit, that you would say yes, whatever that looks like for you. Hey, we are starting a brand new series next week called Do This and More. We're going to be looking at this concept, this idea of what it means to please God. I think all of us know that we're given the option in life in a lot of different ways to live. We can live it for ourselves, we can live it for other people, or we can live it for God. And what if we decide to live our lives in order to please God? What does that look like? And hopefully we're going to discover that in the coming weeks. So please join us for that. It's going to be a great series. And again, like Steve said, if you have any questions about anything going around at Kensington or at this campus, please go check out the hub. We've got all sorts of information for you. You can go talk to Emma as well if you're interested in joining this new Move Out team. And lastly, if you're looking for prayer at the end of the service, our prayer team, our amazing prayer team, will be down here at the edge of the stage ready to pray with you. We love you guys. Thank you so much for coming. We'll see you next week. God bless.